There is a deeply rooted, almost primal human terror that is always associated with the complete and sudden loss of physical autonomy. Joseph arrives in Egypt stripped of family, property, and legal identity. He is purchased by Potiphar, a captain of the royal guard, reduced to a piece of inventory in a foreign empire. This pyramid maps the Egyptian social structure. Pharaoh sits at the pinnacle, Potiphar just beneath. Joseph is pinned to the lowest foundation. Yet psychologists define a locus of control. External control relies on wealth and rank. Internal control relies on personal integrity, regardless of environment. In this rigid hierarchy, a captive at the bottom is on a rapid trajectory to completely manage the massive estate of the man who owns him. When capability is anchored entirely internally, physical chains lose their power to dictate a person's ultimate utility to the human system. Inside Potiphar's house, Joseph doesn't remain a basic laborer for long. He is steadily promoted until he is managing the entirety of his master's estate and fields. The text identifies a specific external constant driving this rise. The Lord was with Joseph. This divine presence manifests as a tangible, repeating prosperity in every task he touches. Looking at this flowchart, we can track the transfer of decision-making power. Potiphar surrenders so much operational oversight to Joseph that the text says he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. When a subordinate operates with zero friction and perfect reliability, the supervisor naturally steps back. Joseph's extreme competence effectively neutralizes the legal imbalance between them. A strict hierarchy built on legal force is inherently lazy. It will happily surrender its daily operations to anyone demonstrating absolute, unshakable integrity. But operational authority invites pressure. Potiphar's wife sets her sights on Joseph, and her demand to lie with me is a daily, relentless psychological stress test. Joseph counters with strict administrative logic. He argues that his master has kept absolutely nothing from him except her, and to cross that boundary would be a severe betrayal of trust. Joseph then elevates the stakes. He identifies the act as a great wickedness and sin against God, placing his moral baseline far above the reach of Egyptian domestic law or local property rights. The verbal boundary eventually breaks down entirely. She corners him alone in the house and physically grabs his garment. Forced to choose, he abandons his clothing and flees the house. Maintaining an internal locus of control is expensive. It often requires sacrificing immediate physical safety and throwing away hard-earned status to keep your core integrity intact. The physical evidence left behind is immediately weaponized. The abandoned garment, which actually proves Joseph's refusal, is flipped into physical proof of a crime. She presents this garment to the household staff and frames the narrative around Joseph's outsider identity. She emphasizes that Potiphar brought a Hebrew into the house to mock them, stoking class resentment and tribal division. When Potiphar hears his wife's version of events, his reaction is swift and severe. He exercises his ultimate legal authority, stripping Joseph of his rank and erasing years of meticulous work in a single afternoon. Success dependent on the approval of a human system is incredibly fragile. A lifetime of steady, faithful labor can be dismantled in seconds by a single, well-placed lie. Joseph is sent to the place where the king's prisoners are bound. He is thrust back to absolute zero. No agency, no influence, and deep isolation. The environmental shift is brutal. He goes from managing a vast, sunlit agricultural and domestic empire to sitting in the dark, restricted confines of a royal dungeon. Yet the text points out a crucial detail. The Lord was with Joseph. The external environment has degraded drastically, but the core variable remains perfectly intact. If Joseph's previous prosperity was just a byproduct of Potiphar's massive wealth, that success would vanish in a prison cell. Because it survives in the dark, we know its source is completely independent of the surroundings. Almost immediately, the keeper of the prison begins to notice the exact same unshakable qualities in Joseph that Potiphar saw years earlier. This cyclical model tracks a chronological repetition. Just as Potiphar did, the prison keeper abdicates control to the lowest-ranking person. The record states the keeper looked not to anything that was under his hand, mirroring Potiphar's total surrender. We can define this pattern as the architecture of resilience. Joseph's extreme competence and moral clarity act as an independent variable. It produces the exact same result whether he is placed in a palace or a pit. When a person builds their life on quiet, unshakable faith and personal integrity, their true prosperity operates on a different frequency. It becomes immune to physical captivity, to external hierarchies, or systemic injustice.